So everybody came tonight, obviously, to learn about detoxification. It's a big problem these days. It's not something that's always talked about a lot in the medical community. It's not something that we really learn a lot about in medical school. But as we go on more and more and see the health problems that are rising and rising in our communities, we know that the toxicities that we're exposed to is a lot of the reason. So this is a very new avenue of treating chronic diseases. One of the problems with toxicity is our liver, which is the main organ to detoxify ourselves. You can think of it like a cup of water, and your liver has a capacity to handle and detoxify a certain amount of toxins all day long. Well, as we're exposed to more and more things in our community, it's like filling up the cup of water. And eventually, I don't want to do it and make a mess, but then eventually it gets too full. And our liver gets overburdened. And then we experience ill health due to this toxicity and over-toxic burden, if you will. What we are is what we eat, breathe, touch, exposed to, everything that comes into our body, and whatever we don't get rid of is left in us. So that's our ability to detoxify. We take in all these things all day long that we're exposed to, and whatever our body doesn't handle, absorb, or eliminate is then left in us. And if those things are not healthy, then we're not healthy. Every year, the average person is exposed to about 14 pounds of chemicals that they shouldn't be or that are not good. So think about that. It's like a small bowling ball every year of poison that your body has to deal with. And doing some sort of detoxification effort like we're talking about is a way to help cleanse those toxins out of your body and restore health. It's very important to have a healthy GI tract. That's really the basis of all detoxification, but it's also the basis or the site of where we absorb most of these toxins. A healthy GI tract starts with first being able to digest food. That's its main job. It has to break down food particles into proteins and amino acids and vitamins that we can then absorb and use to be healthy. And we also have to have healthy elimination. If we don't have good bowel movements and get rid of those toxins, then they build up in us. Just like I showed in the first slide, whatever we don't eliminate is left in us. The microflora is probably one of the most important things that we're learning about these days as far as overall health. And what that really means is that's all the bacteria that's within us, and mostly in the intestinal tract. We've known for years that our GI tract is full of bacteria. Never really thought it did much. However, we now know that it's crucially important to our overall health. And if the bacteria in our intestine get out of balance, or get killed off, or overgrown by yeast, then we have lots of health issues. The bacteria in our intestine are necessary for us to break down food, to absorb vitamins. It helps our immune system. It actually regulates a lot of our genes. They're even finding that a lot of the bacteria in our intestine will actually transfer genetic material into us, which helps regulate our genes. So the bacteria in our intestine are critically important. Probably one of the most important things out there as far as chronic disease these days. Gut integrity, what that means is the integrity or the strength or the composition of the lining of the intestine. The lining of our intestine has the surface area of a tennis court, so it's very, very large. There's a lot of area in there, and that's necessary to absorb all the vitamins and nutrients and things that we need to take in from our food supply. So it's a very large area. And it's like a piece of cheesecloth. It has little holes in it so that the good things can get through and hopefully the bad things can stay out. However, because of possibly imbalance of the bacteria or exposure to toxins or exposure to yeast or lots of other reasons, that piece of cheesecloth can get torn up. And if it does, now we start absorbing things that we're not supposed to. Things like bacteria and yeast or larger molecules that we're not supposed to absorb. All of those things get into our system, and now it has to be dealt with, either by the immune system or being detoxified by the liver. So if the gut integrity is not kept in place, we can really run into a lot of problems. Sure.
Doesn't those intestines get calcified? And I mean, I get friends that get chunks of it cut out because it's turned to stone, basically. So those toxins would also not only shred it, but turn it into a rock, basically, so it doesn't.
I mean, there's reasons that
don't even move through it.
Yeah, I mean, there's reasons that we remove parts of the intestine, and there's lots of different reasons that that can happen. Okay, so what are toxins? Really, any chemical, any compound can be considered a toxin. The thing that differentiates a toxin from a non-toxin is really the dose. I mean, we think of toxins as poisons, but really even water, if we take too much of it, can be a toxin, can kill us. So any chemical has the capacity to be a toxin. In our case, of course, we're concerned about things that have ill effect on our metabolism or our pathology. So those are the things that we're considering toxins. And when we build up these chemicals or these toxins in our body beyond what the liver can handle, that's called toxic burden. That's what's overflowing out of the glass of water. The thing with toxins is that they're fat soluble. And what that means is that they're like soap. If you put soap in a bucket of water, it doesn't really dissolve, it just floats there, or oil, for example. Those are things that are fat soluble. So they don't get diluted or absorbed into water. Unfortunately, we're about 70% water. So these toxins do not go well in us. So what your body does to take care of that is it stores it in fat tissue. Since they're fat soluble, that's really the only part of the body that they can really hide in, if you will. So all of the toxins, as they build up in our body, get stored in fat. So our fat is very critical for toxin management and regulation, which is why it plays into weight loss and inability to lose weight, for example. Lots of places that we can be exposed to toxins. Most of these are pretty evident, but the air is a big one. There's pollution everywhere, exhaust from all the cars. You drive through downtown Chicago with your window down and you get smoke and diesel exhaust and all kinds of issues. And then of course we've got solvents. One thing people don't think about is heavy metals in the air, but especially say around coal factories or petroleum plants. A lot of that air that's being exuded from those plants has mercury in it, it has arsenic, cesium, lots of metals that can get into our system and really cause problems. And pesticides and herbicides, overspray from golf courses or parks that we can get. And then there's radiation and then any other inhalants in the air. The EPA did a study back a few years ago where they looked at people and they did fat biopsy, so they took out a little bit of their fat tissue and tested it. 100% of the people that they tested had levels of dioxins, PCBs, xylene, and dichlorobenzene. These are all very toxic organic chemicals that we see from a lot of factories or pollution, but everyone that they tested had these in their system. And we see that even in our practice here. We
haven't been around for a while, have they?
Pardon me?
The PCBs haven't been around for a while, have they?
About 40 or 50 years. They're regulated now, but they're still out there. We test a lot of patients in our practice for blood tests. We don't do fat biopsies, but we do blood tests on people, and it's very rare to not see some levels of these things in our patients. So even people that think they're living clean, if you will, you just can't avoid these things. They're all over. Columbia University did a study a few years ago, and when they looked at health records, they found that 95% of cancer cases were in some way influenced or caused by diet or the environment. So two big things that we can control in our life that really control most cancer cases. And again, our food is a big issue as far as where we get these chemicals. Our food now Instead of coming from the farm or like it used to be 100 years ago, now it all comes from factories. It's in boxes, it's packaged, chemicals, preservatives, additives, food coloring, all these things that are in all of our food that we eat. You look at the ingredient label and there's 30 or 40 things on it, and none of those things are really food. They're food-like products. And so doing that, we're really consuming chemicals. We're not really consuming a lot of food. And those are all chemicals that your liver and your body has to deal with. To get an idea of the extent of this, this is even from 20 years ago. At that time, there were 5 million different chemicals registered with the EPA. And just to look at this, there were 2,000 a year new at that time, 8,700 food additives, things that weren't in foods 100 years ago, again, 7,500 different cosmetic ingredients. So it's very widespread, and these numbers are probably doubled now. But we do have the government out there protecting us, right? The EPA's out there looking after all of these chemical producing agencies and everyone that's producing all these chemicals. And it's out there to protect us. Well, in 1976, they passed a law called the TSCA Act. And what that did was, supposedly, was going to set out regulations and help regulate toxic compounds in the environment to help protect us. Well, what they did when they put that law into effect is that every chemical that was out there at the time grandfathered in without any testing. That included PCBs, dioxin, xylene, all the cleaning compounds. So they were all deemed safe just because they existed already. None of those were tested. We now know, for example, terrible problems with PCBs and things. But they were deemed safe by the government back then. Even since then, there's only been testing on less than 300 different compounds. So it's very easy for a chemical plant or a chemical producer to get these chemicals registered with the government. Really, all they have to do is show a few mouse studies that the mice didn't die, and they can get approved. There's really no law that they have to prove that these things are safe to humans. It's not until somebody raises a concern, then does human testing take place, and then the impetus is on the companies to prove that they're safe. I mentioned PCBs, which was a big one. As you mentioned, they've been outlawed for a number of years, but they're still out there everywhere. They get in the environment. The half-life of these chemicals is about 18 years. So all of the PCBs that were produced over the last 50 years before they were outlawed have built up in our society. It's going to take hundreds of years until they're gone. The problems that PCBs can cause: hormone problems, immune function problems, cancer problems, birth defects. And we get PCBs even now that we're exposed to in electronics. The etching material that they use on electronic boards is made with PCBs. It's very small amounts, but they've done testing even if you're around computers all day long or electronic equipment. There's small amounts of PCB gas that's given off of those machines. So we do pick it up. The other big area we get it now is in our seafood supply. A lot of the fish are contaminated with PCBs, especially farm-raised fish is the worst. This shows here the Great Lakes. The dark red areas are areas where there's high PCB levels in the sediment. So again, PCBs are in this, and this is going to take hundreds of years to dissipate. So it's with us forever, even though they've been outlawed. And as I mentioned, farm-raised fish is really not good. It's very high in PCBs. It's got lots of colorings, GMOs, hormones, insecticides, antibiotics. So lots of things in farm-raised fish. We buy salmon and we think we're eating healthy, and it may be healthier than other foods, but the farm-raised fish is really not very good at all.
Yeah, they're actually fed corn.
Right. And huge differences in composition compared to wild salmon, for example. Another chemical that's very prevalent in our community is xylene. We get xylene from cigarette smoke, paints and varnishes and those kind of things. And this is, again, a very common thing that we find on testing that we do in people. And it causes a lot of nervous system problems, reproductive problems, because it's an endocrine disruptor. When I say endocrine disruptor, you'll hear that throughout the talk, because a lot of these things are endocrine disruptors. And what that means is that these compounds get into your body and they look like hormones to your body. A lot of them look very similar to estrogen, for example. So these chemicals get in your body thinks it has more estrogen than it should, it reacts as such, and your liver has a hard time getting rid of them because they're really not the hormones that they were made to get rid of. So these endocrine disruptors are a big problem. This is a big long study here. You don't have to read all this, but this is talking about atrazine, which is a very common herbicide that's sprayed, especially in the Midwest. And what they found in this study is that atrazine is a big mitochondrial disruptor. So another disruptor word. Mitochondria are the little powerhouse parts of the cells. They're like the furnaces. They're what make the energy so that the cells can operate. Every cell has thousands of mitochondria in it. If the mitochondria die, then the cell dies. Again, it's kind of like the furnace. And this herbicide atrazine is a big disruptor of the mitochondria. And what they found in this study was that people that had high levels of atrazine had much higher long-term risk of insulin resistance and obesity. Insulin resistance is the precursor of diabetes. So people that are in high exposure areas of atrazine tend to have higher BMIs and higher rates of diabetes. And this is where we find atrazine in the soil and in the air, mostly in the Midwest. And guess where obesity rates are the highest? About the same area.
The breadbasket.
Yep. Other place that we can see toxins is in things that we're exposed to in our everyday life. Cosmetics are a big one, and I'm going to talk more about that in a second. But skincare products, smoking, of course, alcohol, caffeine, prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs even. All of these things have to be dealt with by our liver as far as detoxifying them to get rid of them. And using any of these in excess can, of course, overburden the liver. The skin is the body's largest organ, and because of that, it's very good at absorbing things. Almost like the intestine, it has a very large surface area. The average man, for example, before they leave their house in the morning, has probably applied 6 different chemicals to their body. What they found in women that number is really more like 12 or 13 before you leave the house. Those 12 or 13 compounds have approximately 126 different chemicals in them. So before you even leave the house, your body's dealt with 126 different chemicals that it has to detoxify. And again, the skin is very good at absorbing these things. If we think about the drugs that we give by patches, estrogen patches, hormone patches, pain medicine, nitrogen patches for nitroglycerin. We do this because the skin is very good at absorbing these things. And for example, with hormones, the estrogen dose that we use in an estrogen patch is like millionths of a gram. It's very tiny. But that's all it takes to get into your body and have a good effect if you need estrogen. Well, so think about how that's working if you're covering your skin with creams or lotions. There's lots of absorption there. And if those things aren't healthy, then we're going to get into problems. If you want to look at your labels, parabens is a big one, and that's why I mentioned this one separately. You'll find that on the labels. That's a really, really big hormone disruptor. It really messes up estrogen metabolism in your body. Can cause reproductive problems and infertility. So that's a big one that you really want to try to avoid. The other thing that they show out there, you'll see on a lot of labels, is it just says fragrance. Yeah. Think, oh, that's okay, it just makes it smell good. But really, fragrance is code word for poison. They've done studies. The chemicals that they can label as fragrance, they really don't have to identify them on the label. They can just say fragrance, and they do that because the chemicals are very dangerous. This is a list of all the things that they found in, quote, fragrances that will cause problems. In Europe, a lot of these substances are labeled as very high concern. They're carcinogens, very toxic. So again, if you see the word fragrance, run fast. The other source that we see toxins, of course, is water. That's pretty evident. The water supply is a big source for toxins. We've all heard about the problems in Flint, and that was with lead in the water. Lead is a big problem, of course, but Flint really is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, everybody got really upset and alarmed about Flint, but when they tested water samples around the country, about 10 to 12% of other water systems have more lead than Flint did. So again, Flint is not the worst. There's other places out there that are bad. This shows here, if you look at all the dark spots, those are all spots with as high of lead levels as Flint had. So again, they're all over. It's not just Flint. We see toxins in the food and soil, of course. I mentioned the food products, things that come out of factories have lots of preservatives and colorings in them. A lot of our meats contain hormones and antibiotics. And these antibiotics in the foods that we eat can cause problems because as we eat the food that has the antibiotic in it, that antibiotic actually acts on the bacteria in our intestine, kills off the bacteria in our intestine, and then we have all those health issues that I talked about by having our microbiome messed up. So that's really the big problem with the antibiotics. It's not that we absorb these things and they really cause any problem. It's really the problem that they cause to the bacteria that's in us, which then makes us sick. This here is a list called the Dirty Dozen, and this is from the Environmental Work Group. This is an agency that looks at food toxicities and pesticides and organic foods and labels things as organic or safe. And every month they come out with a list of the foods that they tested that have the highest pesticide rates associated with them. So this is the list, and it stays pretty much the same every month. There's a few things that come and go. Apples are almost always at the top of the list. Lots of pesticides on apples. They have to put them on there. They go bad in the store in 1 or 2 days. But these are the things that, if you can afford organic fruits and vegetables, these are the things you want to spend your money on, because these are the things that are the worst if they're not organic. They also put out a list called the Clean 15, which is the other end of the spectrum. Those are the 15 cleanest foods, which are probably okay to avoid buying organic if you don't have to.
John?
Yeah.
Is it different if you wash them, or is it absorbed into the fruit?
I mean, washing helps, but it doesn't get rid of it because a lot of it is absorbed into the fruit itself. It kind of depends if it's things that were sprayed on while they were farming it and growing it versus the stuff that they spray on when the fruit's laying in the truck to keep it red. That stuff does come off. Cleaning products, that's pretty evident that that's a lot of toxins. We know everything that's under your cabinet that you use to clean your house with is pretty much all a poison. And the problem is that these things, even though they're sitting in your cabinet, you use them, there's a lot of off-gassing of them. So it's in the environment, it's in the air of your house. And that's what really causes problems. Most people would think that in their house where things are nice and clean, that's kind of a safer environment than outside in the polluted air. But really studies have shown that the air in your house is probably 2 to 5 times more toxic than the air outside because of all these compounds in your house, all your furniture, the foam that's in your cushions of your furniture outgasses, your mattresses, any kind of wood product that's glued together or anything. All of that stuff is constantly outgassing into your air. And being closed up in your house, it's really worse than being outside. And what they found is when you're exposed to a new toxin in your house, for example, or any of these cleaning products, that within 26 seconds it shows up in your bloodstream. So the absorption through the air, through your lungs, into your bloodstream is almost instantaneous. And the last thing that we can have is what's called internal toxins. toxins that we generate within our body. And that's going to be the bacterial problems that we may have in the intestine, byproducts of our metabolism, carbon dioxide, ammonia, hormones. When you're out running, you produce lactic acid, so you have to detoxify all of that. So all of those things can build up and be things we have to deal with. The other thing is stress. Everybody's under stress these days. Stress is also a big toxin because of the way it affects our adrenal glands, our hormones, what it does to our intestinal bacteria, all increases our toxic burden. The barrel here demonstrates, as I showed with the cup earlier, your liver's capacity to detoxify. So all day long we're exposed to all of these bad things out in our environment, and we have our barrel there, we have our liver, and drip, 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 the liver or the barrel gets filled up. Everything is fine as long as the water level's down here. But as soon as it gets up to the top, it just takes one more drip for that barrel to overflow. So now all of a sudden you're toxic, your body can't handle all the exposure, and now you start getting sick. We have immune problems, reproductive problems, endocrine, liver, brain, nervous system, heart, lungs. So it really affects every organ system. It's not just one cause and effect. So you can't just say that, well, heavy metals affect our immune system, because if the heavy metal is what filled up the barrel and made it overflow, but maybe your brain is really more susceptible to the toxins than your immune system, so you end up with a neurologic issue. So again, there's really no one organ system that gets pinpointed to any one toxin. And we all respond differently to the toxins and our ability to detoxify things, because we all have different sized barrels. That's just our genetic variation. That's why two of you can live in the same house and one person is sick all the time and one isn't, because maybe one person's barrel is bigger than the other. So you're able to hold more, to detoxify better, more efficiently. We have lots of patients that we look at these toxin levels. For example, husband and a wife, they live in the same house, exposed to the same things, do the same things, and their levels in their blood tests are completely opposite. Not even close. You wouldn't even think they live together. And that's just because everybody's different. So as I mentioned, signs that we're not detoxifying well, or that barrel is overfilling, it can be every organ system that gets affected. Digestion, our GI tract is a big one. That's one of the first things we see. Weight issues, cholesterol problems, neurologic problems, fibromyalgia, muscle, joint pain, migraines, asthma, heart, lung problems, hormonal problems. Any of those, and it can all be due back to the detoxification. And this is really kind of what we're looking at is in the whole functional medicine thing that you see that we're practicing here. And that's to take all of these problems, and instead of just treating this individual problem, let's look back and find the root cause. What made the barrel overflow to begin with, and let's take care of that, rather than giving you a medication maybe that masks your allergies. So why do we want to detox? Again, it's to lower the level of the water in the barrel. We're exposed to toxins all over the place. Back in 2006, the CDC did a study where they did a blood test looking for 148 different synthetic toxins in people. Every person had toxins in them, and the average was 116 of the 148. So again, we're all exposed to this. No one is immune to it. There's a study that they just did that found Roundup, which is out there sprayed on all of our crops every day. It's on every piece of food that you eat. Even when you're buying the organic, healthy stuff, it's all sprayed, it's everywhere. And again, this was found in women's breast milk. So you're feeding that to your baby. And it was also found in the umbilical cord blood. This was a study just this year in 2017, where every woman in the study had Roundup in their umbilical cord blood. So before the baby's even born, it's being exposed to these toxins. We eat 30 to 50 tons of food in our lifetime. So think about how many bowling balls that is every year that you're exposing yourself to, that your liver and your body have to detoxify. A lot of times doing a detox is a good way to kind of jumpstart your GI tract. And people that just have overall GI issues, IBS, don't really know why. A lot of times doing a detox will act as a reset, and it'll reset your GI system, and then you feel better, and then you can slowly reintroduce things back in to see maybe if you can control a lot of your GI issues. I mentioned the weight issue earlier. Detoxification can be a big problem with not losing weight, and detoxifying can be a way to lose weight. What happens when we diet, this little drawing here is showing, if you will, all of our fat cells. As I mentioned earlier, the toxins are fat soluble, so they're all stored in these fat cells. Well, as we go on a diet and lose weight, we don't really lose fat cells. What happens is the cells that we have get smaller. Well, what happens as far as detoxification and toxins is that builds up the concentration. So if you've got this beach ball of a fat cell and it's full of toxins, and now that shrinks down to the size of a melon, the concentration of the toxins in that fat cell are increased. Well, your body doesn't like that. It sees that as being overburdened again with toxicity. So what your body will do is it will try to make those fat cells bigger. It will try to stop the weight loss process because it just sees it as you're making yourself more toxic. And your body's going to try to fight that, so it's not going to let you lose weight. No matter how little you eat, no matter how much exercise you do, no matter how many sit-ups you do, if your body's sensing that it's toxic, it's not going to let yourself lose weight. So if we come along and do a detox and get rid of the amount of toxins that are in that beach ball, now it can shrink down. Your body doesn't see that as a toxic state, and then it will maintain that weight loss at a healthy form. And then if you get toxic again, now you're back over here. The liver, again, is the most important organ as far as detoxification, but besides being the primary organ for detoxification, it does other things. It filters our blood. All of the blood from your intestinal tract, which, as I mentioned earlier, that tennis court-sized area of tissue that absorbs all these things, and all of that blood, as soon as it's absorbed, immediately goes to the liver before it goes anywhere else. So the liver acts as the first line filter for any of these poisons that you brought into your bloodstream through your intestine. It also stores glucose and provides energy, and it's very important for hormone production and metabolism. It also secretes bile. Bile is the liquid that's made from the liver that's put into the intestine, and that bile is a great way to excrete toxins. As the liver pulls those toxins out, they're put in the bile, that gets into the GI tract, then it comes out in the stool. So that's kind of the process of getting the toxins from the liver out of the system. And this is the way it does that. It's a two-step process, what we call phase 1 and phase 2. The toxins come in, and because they're fat soluble, they don't really mix well with the other things in our organs. It's difficult to excrete them. Our urine is water, the bile is water, the stool is water soluble. So to get these toxins out, we have to take them from being fat soluble to water soluble. So we have to take that oil and make it water soluble. The first step in doing that is what's called phase 1. And what that does is it usually takes part of that molecule off, which makes it less fat soluble and more like water. But in taking that molecule off, it actually forms a compound that's more toxic than the original compound. So that's not good. And that's this toxic byproduct here, what we call an intermediate metabolite. And these guys are very toxic. Fortunately, they immediately go into the next detoxification engine, which is called phase 2. That takes that compound and usually adds another molecule to it, so it can then be excreted, and now it's completely water soluble. So now it can be excreted and your body gets rid of it. So a way to look at this process is phase 1 is like taking the garbage, putting it in the garbage can and taking it out to the street. Phase 2 comes along, and that's the garbage truck picking it up. Well, if the truck doesn't come pick it up at the same rate that you're putting it out there, then it builds up. So now you've got these toxins building up out at the street, causing problems.
More trouble than when you start.
Could be.
Don't keep it moving.
It could be. So again, these two phases or these two detoxification engines in our liver. The first one, phase one, it's just called the cytochrome system is what that is. It's again a series of enzymes, and it forms these intermediate metabolites, which are really bad guys. They're what's called free radicals or free oxygen radicals. You may have heard of that word. Free oxygen radicals are very toxic. What they do is they get into your cells and they damage the DNA, so they cause the cell to die. They quite often promote aging because they destroy DNA, so it can make you age more, and again cause cancer, can cause mutations, birth defects. These are very, very toxic compounds. But then it goes into phase two, which is where a conjugation happened. That means putting things together. As I said, it takes a molecule and puts it onto that metabolite, which it can then be excreted. Sulfur is a big one that it'll put on, a sulfur group, a methyl group. There's different compounds that it uses to put onto that molecule. All of these processes, phase one and phase two, are very highly energy dependent. So these liver cells that are doing this require lots and lots and lots of mitochondria, that little energy production part of the cell, to do this. Next to your brain, the liver is the most highly energy dependent organ we have. So it's very energy dependent. This again demonstrates this process. Again, here's the toxins out here. They come in, they get acted on by phase one. But in phase one, these are the micronutrients and the chemicals and the compounds that are needed for that phase one engine to work. So as these compounds are going down the assembly line, these are the little workers that need to be there. Lots of vitamins, calcium, glutathione, different things that are needed. Once it gets off of that assembly line, it immediately becomes a metabolite. That metabolite then goes into phase two. Phase two requires lots of amino acids and proteins, as well as a lot of micronutrients, vitamins, and mentioned here sulfur is a big one that it needs. Then out of phase two, then it comes off that assembly line, goes out in the liver or the kidney and gets excreted. So as long as all that's happening very smoothly, then things are good. The problem comes when we deplete those nutrients. Because if we don't have the nutrients there, there's nobody working that assembly line and it just stops. And a problem can be with a lot of the medications that we take these days. We're on more and more medications. It's not uncommon to see patients come in and have medication lists with 20, 25 different drugs on them. Well, every one of those drugs has to be detoxified in your body every day. Every dose you take it, your body has to act on that.
And they deplete those nutrients.
Right, and in doing that, these things are all used up. Cholesterol meds, for example, use up CoQ10. CoQ10 is the most important nutrient needed for mitochondrial function. That's why people that take statins are quite often fatigued, have joint pain. It's because the CoQ10 gets all used up just metabolizing that drug. Same thing with heart drugs, CoQ10. You can see how common CoQ10 is in this list. And again, that's the most necessary compound needed for mitochondrial function. So when CoQ10 goes away, we don't feel good.
Can you supplement?
Yep. Yep, you absolutely can. So to look at this process again, here we have the toxins coming in, phase one, these are the things we need. Intermediate metabolites, phase two, we need these things, and then it gets eliminated. So let's say we've got more toxins than we can handle. The barrel's overflowing. That comes in, that puts a lot of burden on phase one. However, now, because our soils are so bad, we don't absorb the nutrients like we used to, even if we do eat healthy. The food that we do eat doesn't have anywhere near the vitamins or nutrients it used to, because there's nothing left in the soil. It's been farmed and farmed and farmed. Everything's extracted, it's not repleted. So, well, it can be food, but it just doesn't have the nutrients that it used to. Even growing organically, the ground doesn't have the nutrients that it used to. Then we're taking these medications, which also deplete these things. So now that puts us in a process where we don't have any of these workers down here to run this assembly line. These toxins now get stuck at phase 1. Phase 1 doesn't work. So all these toxins go back out into your system, and the only place they can go is fat-soluble places to be stored. So they go into your fat cells, they go into your hair, they get stored in your bone, in your brain, and they just sit there. So they're just sitting out there all day long. Now let's say we have a problem with phase 2. Say phase 1 is working okay, things are coming along through the intermediates, but now in phase 2 we don't have enough of these workers. So phase 2 doesn't work well. Well, if phase 2 isn't working well, then the problem is we build up these very bad intermediate metabolites. These are worse than the guys that we started with. So now we're in worse problems. So even worse than not having phase 1 working is if phase 1 is working and phase 2 isn't. That's a big problem. So again, for this system to work well, these two engines have to be working in synchronicity. Has to come in, go out, come in, and go out.
So it's a dangerous thing to be constipated while phase 1 is induced and phase 2 is you're constipated.
Well, constipation doesn't really play into this at all.
Well, it's getting rid of it.
Well, that's getting rid of it down here. That's a problem at this end.
Okay, after phase 2.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But wouldn't that still cause the backup? Because if we're not evacuating that stuff, aren't we then getting it reabsorbed?
It'll get reabsorbed into your bloodstream and then come back into the liver eventually. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Any other questions as far as this part goes?
I see it. So the phase 2 is the glutathione and the B5 and the B12.
Right.
But, so we could do all of those things over here and not do those and still have elimination.
Mm-hmm.
But we could do both things, and then if we're not evacuating all that waste, we're still very troubled.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And again, a lot of the issue is that these processes use up all of those vitamins and nutrients, so there's nothing there when things come along. Whoops. A nice little example to think about is that even taking Tylenol uses up a lot of glutathione.
Which I didn't see
If we
a
look
lot of glutathione on that,
right here, glutathione is needed in both.
but I didn't see it on the what pills suck up, what nutrients.
Yeah, well, Tylenol does it. If you come in with Tylenol overdose, what they do is they give you something that makes glutathione, and that's what gets rid of it. It metabolizes it faster in your body. Well, Tylenol uses this up at a very, very high rate. So, you've been out drinking all night, and your body's trying to get rid of all this alcohol the next morning. You take some Tylenol, and you just knock your liver out some more. So you really make things worse than better. So don't take Tylenol the next morning.
Is B5 biotin?
It's in biotin, yes. Yes. Okay, so if you don't have any other questions as far as the science part of things, at this point, Carrie Palmer, my PA that also does all of this stuff, she's going to talk to you about the Detox program itself, and she'll go through all the how we do all this.
This is not my favorite thing to do. I'm just going to say that right now. I am great if I can bring you all just in a room individually and sit one-on-one. This is not great, but I'm going to do the best I can, so hold up with me. And just, we've got a message here. We do have people watching in the lobby here and downstairs, and when we ask questions, they can't hear what you're asking. So I'm going to ask if we can to hold off on questions until the end, and then we have an extra microphone, we'll pass it around. Otherwise, I'll repeat questions, but we'll try to hold off until the end, and then make sure that everybody else who's watching can really figure out what we're talking about. So, thanks to Dr. Koziarski for all that information, and who else is scared to death now about what's in our body? Unfortunately, we can't escape all of the toxins in our environment. I mean, he's told us a million different ways that we can get toxins every day. But we can do a lot to try to help reduce it. And he's given us some good ideas of ways to avoid certain toxins, but what we're talking about tonight is a way to really upregulate or really get our liver going so that we can take care of our current toxic burden, in addition to hopefully then making some slight lifestyle changes to really try to avoid some other issues in the future. So the Core Restore program is something that has been developed. It's a 7-day program of basically intense therapy for the liver and the body to decrease inflammation, to really upregulate or really get that liver working for us and start the process of getting the toxins out. Basically, there are 3 different components to it. We'll get a kit and I'll show you in a minute, but the 3 different components supply the micronutrients that we need, which are vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients, phyto meaning plant, so those are nutrients specifically from certain plants or other biologic ingredients that really help our body do what we need to do, especially the liver, really upregulate and get things moving. But then it supplies some clean protein, some easily digested protein that can really fuel us as we're going through this process. The other additional little benefit that we get from this 7-day detox is we're removing a lot of commonly inflammatory foods. And in doing that, sometimes if we have some underlying minor annoying GI issues, miraculously those kind of start drifting away. So sometimes it can help us kind of clear up some other little complaints. So the 3 main goals that we're working on with this detox program, the first is remove, and that's removing mainly what we're putting in our gut that's harming us. And it's a 2-step process with this 7-day program. The first 2 days are kind of the preparatory step where we really remove stuff, and then the remaining 5 days we're still very careful about what we put in. The second part of this is to restore, and that's really talking about restoring liver function. Dr. Koziarski did a great job of explaining how much our liver works for us to try to help us get all of this stuff out of us. But there are multiple reasons why that can really get backlogged. So at this point, this is really trying to support that system and flood your body with the nutrients that we need to really restore that liver health. And then the third is putting all of it together, is finally starting the revitalization process and really getting the toxins out with a healthy system. So 3 components, as I said, in the kit that anybody who ends up picking this up will get. The very first component is this core support, which is a powder that we end up putting in a smoothie or shake or whatever you like to call it. We do this all 7 days, and what it supplies is, once again, that clean, very easily digested protein that fuels us, in addition to fiber, because fiber is crucial to a healthy GI tract and getting everything out. But then also it really works on the phase 2 portion. So as Dr. Koziarski pointed out, you have the phase 1 and phase 2. We really want phase 2 working well, because if it doesn't, we have those intermediates sitting in the middle that are worse than what we started with. So this really focuses on supporting that phase 2 section so that once we start really getting the toxins out, we don't hit that wall. But then it also helps with antioxidant supplementation and helps us heal. The second component is a capsule that we start from the very beginning. It's really a super potent multivitamin. Lots of good vitamins and minerals that help work on both sides of the liver detoxification pathway. But then also a lot of antioxidants to help the healing process, help the liver heal, but then also help the other body tissues to heal. And then the third component is another set of capsules that we don't start until day 3. But that's something that really helps our liver work with us from a digestive standpoint as well. So there are some big words up there. But lipotropic basically means those are phytonutrients or agents that help our body break down fats. And especially in our liver. I don't know if any of you have ever been told that you have fatty liver or steatohepatitis. There are a lot of us anymore that have some range of fat in our liver, and when that happens, it kind of clogs the system. It makes it less healthy, and it makes it more difficult for our liver to do what it really needs to do. So this helps to start breaking that down a little bit. And then the choleretics or the cholagogues, that just basically means it's kickstarting your liver to really increase bile production, that crucial fluid that the liver makes to help us get the toxins out, helps the bowels move more regularly, but also helps us absorb our fats, which is incredibly important for health and incredibly important to absorb those fat-soluble vitamins. That's true too. So, in the little box that you get along with those 3 different things, you get a patient guide. This is a little book that basically walks you through the whole system. So, honestly, we've given these out to patients just one-on-one in the past with no lecture and not a whole lot of guidance because I can't go through an hour and a half of dialogue with them. But this really will walk you through what you're doing. We will also help guide you along this process if you decide to join us, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But this is really going to be kind of your go-to. And what it does, it talks about foods that we include on this program, and I'm going to go into much more detail with this. But it also talks about foods that we avoid while on this program. In addition, it goes in detail through what we're doing every single day. So, starting on day 1 all the way through day 7, when you take the shakes, when you take the capsules, what you're allowed to eat, all of that sort of thing. So it's all traced out. And then it also supplies sample meal plans and recipes. I did this detox about 6 months ago, and there were a fair number of recipes on there that I really enjoyed. I thought were really, really good. Literally, you could take this guide. There's a shopping list in there. You can go to Meijer or wherever you shop and buy what's on there and do the plan and not have to think about it. And some people like that. It's kind of nice just to have a go-to and you don't have to put any brain power into it. Honestly, I would at least use it as a guide to get some ideas. If there are some that look great, good. Everybody's got different tastes though. Otherwise you can try to tailor it to what you want. We will also supply some additional recipes. Once again, I'll explain that in a few minutes. But this program is a 7-day program. That's how long we're going to be doing it as a group, whoever wants to join us. But there might be some of you that after 7 days say, holy cow, I feel fantastic. Don't make me stop. And if you want to do that, that is just fine. As Dr. Koziarski said, there are different people with different toxic loads. So some of us really would benefit from 7 days and don't necessarily need more. Some of us may really benefit from 14 or even 28 days. And there are ways to do that. If anybody at any point decides they want to do that, contact us. We're happy to guide you through that process. Otherwise, specific details. So like I said, it's a kind of a 2-stage process. The very first 2 days are what we call a modified fast. That means that we are relying on that core support shake or supplement mixed in either water or some sort of dairy alternative milk. And then the 2 alpha-based capsules, 2 in the morning and then 2 in the evening. Ideally, that's what we stick with. That's for 2 days. And what that really does is it allows the gut to rest. The gut doesn't have to do any work, allows the body to focus our energy, focus all of our healing on the liver, and really prepare for the next 5 days. With that said, don't be silly. If you're noticing that you're hypoglycemic, or if you know you have hypoglycemia issues, if you have type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes, we don't want to be stupid about this. So, the ideal is you fast, but if you have to add a little bit of food in, that's fine. Ideally, we suggest adding in fruits and vegetables. It's the easiest for your body to digest, really gives you good phytonutrients again, or the good vitamins and minerals. But that's kind of where we start. And then on days 3 through 7, you're allowed 3 meals a day, but then it's on the meal plan. We still take the shakes, although you can mix them in smoothie type things with some fruit and spice them up a little bit to give you a little variety at that point. We still take those alpha-based capsules, those multivitamins, but then we add in the PhytoCore, which really helps kick up liver production of bile and that sort of thing. So, what to eat? The good news is, fruits and vegetables is on the next slide, there's really not a whole lot I need to take away at all. As Dr. Koziarski talked about, vitamins and minerals are crucial to liver health, and really where we get a lot of those vitamins and minerals are from plants. Mother Nature provided them very readily. So berries especially, specifically, I emphasize because they're incredibly high in antioxidants, incredibly high in B vitamins, high in fiber, lower in sugar, so they're excellent to include. But bananas, apples, and realistically pretty much any other fresh or frozen, non-sweetened fruit is completely acceptable on the program. Not these. Canned fruit, partially because of BPA, which lines cans and other toxins, so we'll try to remove that. But also a lot of it is sweetened or high fructose corn syrup. Sweetened berry juices, so anything with high fructose corn syrup or additional sugar. With that said, if you have a 100% berry juice or 100% vegetable juice, those are fine. Smaller portions, but those are fine. Oranges are on this list. Like I said, part of what we gain with this detox program is also removing commonly inflammatory foods. And when we look at the 8 most likely foods to cause allergies or sensitivities, oranges is one of those. So that's why we generally recommend removing those for 7 days. Vegetables. Once again, if I listed every vegetable you could eat, I'd be here for an hour. So, I mean, I really kind of cut this down clearly. But we are really not taking away many vegetables. Vegetables are crucial for liver health, specifically broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, onion, garlic are vital for your liver health. You'll actually notice in the core support that powder, there's broccoli extract and some Brussels sprout powder, and it's very important. So that's good. Your leafy greens, any sort of leafy green, even just basic romaine lettuce, but your kale, your Swiss chard, your beet greens, all of those incredibly healthy. Your root vegetables, radishes, turnips, parsnips, carrots, sweet potatoes, all of those are good. And beans, high in fiber, high in minerals, good protein. It's a great thing to include with this. Not these. Corn, not a vegetable anyway. But a lot of it is GMO, a lot of allergies or sensitivities to that. Canned vegetables, same reason as we did the canned fruits. And then soy, also a common sensitivity or allergy, and GMO. So, grains. All right, should we have a moment of silence for the foods we're losing? Yeah, so gluten is out. All gluten is out for 7 days. And this includes bread, crackers, cereals. Most of this is so highly processed anyway. Not only is there gluten in there, but there's processed sugars, processed oils, all sorts of other additives and preservatives. So we remove all of that for 7 days. With that said, you can still eat grains. We just want to focus on whole grains. Rice, and I'm not that picky about rice, as long as there's not any additives. It can be white rice or jasmine rice. Brown rice is great as well. Long rice, wild rice, any of that is okay. Oats are okay. GF means gluten-free. So oats are almost always raised and or harvested with gluten-containing grains or wheat. So when you just eat oats, there's a lot of gluten contamination. People who are really sensitive definitely notice it. So you can get gluten-free oats at Meijer. They don't cost any more. You just have to look for it on the container. Quinoa is a pseudo grain, but that actually has some increased protein in it in addition. So that's a great grain to include. Chia seeds, I know it's not a grain, but it can actually kind of act as, especially for breakfast, as an oatmeal type replacement or a breakfast cereal. When you put it in some non-dairy milk or something like that with some cinnamon and fruit, it really creates a pretty sustaining meal. Nuts and seeds, pretty basic. Really, we avoid the peanuts and the soy nuts because of high allergenic potential and or sensitivity potential and GMO contamination, that sort of thing. But really, any other nuts and seeds are on the table. I do caution you, though, don't go buy a big old jug of Planters, because if you turn it over and read the label, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that is not just nuts. So really, I'm looking at raw nuts and or roasted and salted, something with minimal ingredients in it, but incredibly good for you on the diet. Okay, so our second moment of silence. Dairy's out. It's just a week, people. We're all right. But yeah, dairy's out. Cow and even goat milk there's questions on whether or not we have sensitivities to those. With that said, even Meijer has an entire dairy refrigerated section that's completely dairy-free anymore. And really, pretty much any of the alternatives are fine on this diet. Rice, almond, coconut. The one thing I caution is try to veer toward the unsweetened, because some of them have a whole bunch of sugar and other stuff in them. But yeah, all of these are nice, healthy alternatives. There's also coconut milk yogurt, almond milk yogurt at Meijer. Check the sugar content to make sure that it's not too high, but that's, also if you're desperate, that's an alternative. Protein. Just like we are what we eat, so are animals. And it's kind of scary. I don't know how many of you have watched documentaries, regarding our animals and how they're raised and fed, but it's pretty frightening. So when we have you do this detox, as much as you can stick toward organic or well-raised meat. Grass-fed beef were made to eat grass. That's what Mother Nature intended. And there's grass-fed beef at Meijer. This is also an opportunity to go to the farmer's market this weekend. There are lots of local farmers, honestly more and more, that are really starting to cater toward people like us who are looking for non-toxic options, and it's cheaper. So you're supporting somebody locally, less expensive, and you can get, in the end, you could get a half a cow or a quarter of a cow and really cut down the price. So, but stick with clean protein. We do recommend removing eggs for a week. That's also one of those highly allergenic / sensitivities. Fish and shellfish, partially for the reason that Dr. Koziarski talked about, lots of toxins in them. And then processed meat especially, there's a whole slew of preservatives and additives that we want to avoid during the week. Drinks. Okay, so this might be our longest moment of silence. I know. So, we can do it. Yeah, coffee, alcohol. Hey, enjoy it over the next few days because we're going to take it away. I will say, just a quick caveat, for my coffee drinkers who drink 6 to 8 cups a day and know that they're going to die of a migraine if you don't have any, I don't want this to be the breaking point. So if you need to drink 1 cup of coffee in the morning, no cream, no sugar, but if you need to have a little bit of caffeine or black tea or whatever, if you need to have a little bit of coffee, I don't want this to break the deal, and I don't want people to be absolutely miserable on this diet. The problem with coffee is that it's dehydrating and it's highly toxic, most of it, unless we're really careful about where we get it, get organic or something like that. There's a lot of toxins and preservatives. So we're really trying to offload that toxic burden during this week. Same thing with alcohol. But what we can replace it with is water, and lots of it. Ideally we get it, I know, aren't we excited? 64 ounces is kind of what we're shooting for. There are a lot of recipes on Pinterest, or you can Google a whole bunch of spots, but you can put fruit in water, you can put, basil and cucumber and make spa water. There are ways to spice it up and make it a little less boring. But it's honestly crucially important because it really helps. It helps not only get the bowels moving better, it helps clean out the liver, but the other part of detoxification is the kidneys. And so it really helps flush fluid through the kidneys to help that detoxification process as well. Herbal tea, green tea, ideally organic. Green tea especially, great for the liver. So if you love it, drink it. Up to 3 cups a day is absolutely fine. And then like we talked about, a little bit of 100% fruit or vegetable juice is perfectly fine too. Anybody feeling like this? Like, what am I gonna eat for a week? This is cruel. So I know it seems like I'm taking away a lot of foods because clearly a lot of the foods that we discussed removing are a staple in our standard American diet. But during the week of the detox, I challenge you to look at things differently because truly, if you really look at the foods that I've included, there are more. And those foods not only can be incredibly tasty when we know how to prepare them and when we really focus on them and remove all the sugar that's tainting our taste buds from the palate, but it also really builds our bodies up. This is undoing the damage that we've had from our environment, from our medications, from everything else that's been put in our body. And you don't have to feel starved. Even if you think about something like, it looks like this family's enjoying a Thanksgiving dinner, but simply roasting a whole chicken, making a salad, roasting some vegetables, getting a fruit salad, you really can fill yourself up with these foods. You truly can. And for people who have families, for people who have kids, I have 3, you can feed them this. You don't necessarily need to make your own meals. They're not going to starve unless they refuse to eat it. They're not going to starve, and it's actually only going to do them good too. So I just challenge you to think about food a little bit differently when you do this. Dr. Koziarski's wife is an amazing chef, but these are just, she gave us a couple of examples of quick and simple recipes that we can make. This is a red pepper and then basically roasted chicken in a chicken salad, but instead of the mayo, which has a bunch of processed oils and sugars, she took an avocado and swished it up and then, put it all together. And then include a bunch of little vegetables in there like green pepper, onion, garlic, celery, whatever you usually include. And some fresh herbs, absolutely. So yeah, lots of different options there. Another option is something as simple as a chicken breast with a pesto that is really easy to make, a little bit of basil, a little bit of garlic, and then roasting some vegetables. If anybody in here has never had roasted cauliflower or broccoli, do it. Do it. It's amazing. It's really, really good. And kids actually generally like it much better than steamed. And you can actually even have a binge eater on healthy food. So this is my son last night. I made kale chips for the family. And kale chips basically is just taking kale, cutting it up, putting a little olive oil on and a little Himalayan sea salt and throwing them in the oven at 350 for 10 minutes. I got them out of the oven and I was busy doing other things and I said, Graham, could you please bring it to the table? Yeah, and about 3 or 4 minutes later, I look over there and he's got a third of the bowl gone already and the bowl's still on the counter. So, but yeah, it's once you really start eating this way and once you really start preparing foods in ways that's tasty, there are so many wonderfully yummy options out there. There truly are. So, once again, the benefits of this program, we want to feel better. But we're also changing our filter or changing the way our liver works, helping prime it up. I'd be shocked if we don't have several people that lose a few pounds. And most of us, I think, would not argue with that too much. But then obviously the biggest thing we're focusing on with the detox is getting rid of some of those toxins. And we're not going to get rid of every single toxin in our body in a week. Don't get me wrong. But the benefit is we're really priming our liver and improving the liver health so that it will continue to work with you as you continue on past the detox diet. But it's also beneficial for the entire body, and once again, it can help us kind of figure out, is there GI sensitivity, some sort of food you're not tolerating well? For people who do this program after 7 days feel fantastic and then go back to their normal diet and all of a sudden tank, that's a sign that something you're eating is not agreeing with you. So, this is a way to just kind of a quick and dirty way to sometimes figure out, do we have something that's irritating us? So I mentioned that we are going to try to support you as much as possible. I am assuming / hopeful that most of you all are on Facebook. What we've done is we've created this closed Facebook group, Dr. Koziarski's Detox group. So what I encourage all of you to do is, sometime in the next 24, 48 hours, apply to this group. It is closed, so then we'll admit you. Anybody who's not familiar with a closed group, the idea is that you post in there, anybody else who's in the group will see what's posted. But if you ask a question about your bowel movement to the group, let's say, your grandma in Minnesota isn't going to see it on her Facebook feed because it's not going to be on anyone else's feed that's not in the group. So it's private. We do obviously don't ask personal medical questions on that Facebook group. Any personal questions, feel free to call our office. We're happy to help you. But we will be posting recipes, ideas, motivation, all sorts of stuff on it to try to help you guys along the journey. But also, everybody feel free to make your own posts, put pictures on there, ask questions, support each other. The whole idea behind this isn't the easiest thing to do. I'm asking you to change your diet pretty drastically. But when you have support and when you have other people that you know are doing it with you, it helps. It really helps to create some support and help. So, like I said, we are hoping to start this on Saturday, October 7, continuing through Friday, October 13. If you decide to buy the kit today, you do not have to do it on those exact dates. You can do it whenever you want. And like I said, there's that patient guide in there. It'll walk you through everything. You can still join the group and ask questions. It's not a problem. But as many of us as can do it around that time, we'll just be going through the same stuff together. So we can all empathize and talk about what we're going through.